What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Now, I made a video the other day talking about the sentencing hearing coming up for Donald Trump, and I was talking about CNN, and oh, I can't believe they're saying there's no penalties whatsoever. Well, at that time, they hadn't produced a clip. They essentially made a montage that I essentially made a montage of, but their montage is a bunch of several pundits discussing the sentencing hearing, and, you know, I was watching this clip and I was just astounded as to how many times these people said no penalties. They just kept repeating themselves over and over and over and over again. So I made a montage of this, and then I'm gonna play it for you guys, and I'm gonna break down why that's a lie, just outright on its face. It's a lie, but you know, that's just one of those things that CNN and the mainstream news does, and we can't help ourselves but to watch it and point these things out because it's absurd, just outright on its face. But before we get into the clip, I need you guys to do me a favor and smash that like button for me. I would greatly appreciate that. Subscribe if you're new around here and you want to stay up to date with exactly how you're being manipulated by the corporate press and the mainstream news. And share this video anywhere and everywhere you can. I need you guys' help. And if y'all could do that, that would greatly help me out tremendously. And I would greatly appreciate it. But without any further ado, here's this montage that I made.
Donald Trump will face sentencing for his having been found guilty of 34 counts in New York of falsifying business records, allegedly to conceal $130,000 in hush money payments to adult film star and director Stormy Daniels. But there is some good news here for the president-elect. Let's go to CNN's Kara Scannell. Kara, what is the judge in the case saying?
That there wouldn't be any sort of penalty. There would be no time served in any jail or prison. There would be no probation that Trump would be required to abide by. It would.
Wolf, after this opinion, President-elect Trump is still a convicted felon, but there is some good news here as the judge is signaling that he does not intend to impose penalties against Trump. There'll be a sentencing, but there'll be no penalties, no community service, no fine, no jail. So signaling he will not face any penalties.
Jennifer Rogers, you're one of our legal analysts, former federal prosecutor. Trump is going to be sentenced, but the judge says he won't face any penalties. Explain from
next Friday, and he is sentenced, but not sentenced to any penalties.
Sentence, which is nothing, no penalty.
That if Judge Merchan is going ahead with the sentencing, why do you think he's doing it? If he doesn't intend to send him to prison, or it may, from what Paul is saying, may not intend to punishing him in any way at all.
So I think it actually will be not to punish him in any way at all. Not only no incarceration, but Judge Merchan refers to a part of the New York State Code that also means no fine, which that's also remarkable. Like a person is convicted of 34 felonies, then there's not even a fine.
It isn't a sentencing. You know, I mean, there's no fine, no nothing, 34 convictions, and yet most likely to be no actual punishment for it. So,
and this is what MSNBC had to say about that.
This is bullshit.
So these people just can't help but drive that point home that there's no punishment, there's no penalties whatsoever in this whole thing. Well, I don't know if these people have ever heard of the saying that the process is the punishment. Yes, that is a real thing. The process most definitely is the punishment. And now he did kind of point in that direction that there would be definitely no incarceration. That's off the table, right? Well, he didn't point in that direction, but the point I'm getting to is he pointed in the direction that there's probably not going to be any fine, not going to be any probation, although he could still issue some sort of probation, some sort of, you know, unsupervised probation. I don't see a problem with that. But to say that there's no penalties whatsoever, you know, this took him off the campaign trail. There's a penalty right there. Boom. Legal fees for a sham of a court. There's a penalty right there, right? You got, and none of least is the fact that, okay, so we know for a fact that people aren't considered a convicted felon or convicted of anything until they get sentenced. So once he wraps up this sentencing, which makes absolutely no sense, by the way, he will be outright a convicted felon for the rest of his life. This is probably not going to come off of his record unless it gets overturned on appeal, which it's almost 100% guarantee that it's going to get overturned upon appeal, but the process is still going to be there. He's still going to have to shell out more money for appellate court. So these people know all this, right? They knew this going into this. This wasn't meant to punish Donald Trump in the sense of, through the judiciary system, right? That's not what this was meant. They probably knew that he wasn't going to serve any jail time because this is a white-collar crime of all things, a minor white-collar crime that they had to struggle. They had to violate due process. They had to violate his rights to elevate this to a felony upon a make-believe, just, a multiple choice make-believe crime that he was never accused of, never convicted of, never went to court for, any of that. Just a make-believe. So, yeah, this entire thing is the punishment, right? The process is most definitely the punishment. But I'm not going to harp on this all day. I want to switch gears right here. I've got an interesting clip coming from CNN once again. Love CNN, y'all. Gotta love CNN. They're trying, y'all. They're definitely trying. But they fall short all the time. They definitely fall short all the time. But we got this interesting poll, and it goes to show that, yeah, their narrative building is not working much anymore. Let's check this out.
And he's been talking about it on the first day when he comes into office, pardoning all these January 6th prisoners. How does that fare with the American public's view?
Yeah, how does that fare? Well, I will tell you, it ain't popular. It ain't popular. Donald Trump may be more popular than he's ever been, but the idea of him pardoning these January 6th protesters is simply put not a popular proposition. You look overall, it's 33%. It's 33%. Look at the opposition. 59% of the American public, you can barely get 59% of the American public to agree on anything, but they do agree on opposing Trump pardoning the January 6th protesters. Even among the Republican Party, look at this number. Yes, it's 2/3 who support it at 67%, but, Donald Trump's favorable rating within the Republican Party is like 85, 90%.
That's low for Trump.
This is low for Trump. You have this 21% who are opposed to it. That is a pretty significant chunk of folks who are opposed to it. So yes, Republicans like Donald Trump, but they aren't necessarily in love with the idea of pardoning, certainly not overall.
So that's very interesting to me, and it speaks to me one major thing, that I've got a lot of work to do to break these narratives, right? Now, January 6th is very nuanced, right? It's completely nuanced. There's several, almost 1,000 probably, peaceful protesters that were arrested and served time in jail for peacefully protesting at the Capitol on that day, right? We had one side that was restricted. We had another side where cops were waving people into the building. We know for a fact that some of those people that cops were waving into the building were arrested and were sentenced. As a matter of fact, we've covered those articles. I'm not going to I'm not going to go through all that right here, but we know that for a fact. That's absurd. The problem is, the reason I say I've got my work cut out for me is the American people don't know this. This is crazy. How come the American people don't know this? The mainstream news refuses to cover it. They try to portray this narrative. So anything, any evidence, anything that debunks their narrative, they're just going to outright ignore it. Just completely ignore it. That makes my job that much harder, because now I've got to sift through all the garbage to go and find these stories and bring them to you guys. And I have a limited reach on YouTube, which, I'm trying to make that grow, but only you guys can help me do that. But that's neither here nor there. Now, what else I find interesting about this is that it's also breaking the narrative on certain levels. Check this out.
Now, you may be asking yourself, okay, how the heck then did Donald Trump win that election back in November, right? Given that you see this support and you see this opposition among the American public, and most Americans, I will note in our CNN poll, said that they expected that Trump was going to try and pardon him. How did it work then? Well, take a look at January 6th memories. Take a look here. All right. January 6th is the biggest memory of Trump's first term. Look at this.
Wow.
It's just 5.
That is something.
It's just 5%. I mean, most folks simply put were willing to dismiss it without much of an issue. And among Republicans, what do we see? It was just 2%. So even though you had that significant chunk of Republicans who said we oppose it, even though the vast majority of Americans opposed it, the bottom line when it came to November, even when it comes now, most Americans, simply put, Manu, are not thinking about it.
And of course, everything that happened on January 6, 2021 was because of Trump sowing doubts over a free and fair election. How is that in line with the way American public views what happened in the 2020 elections?
Yeah, I mean, this to me, remember, he brought along Republicans, and this is just such a fascinating trend line. The 2020 votes were cast or counted accurately. You go back to 2021, this is among Republicans, it was 31%. You look just before this election, October of 2024, it was 32%, basically the same number. Then all of a sudden, December of 2024, it jumps up to 44%. Well, what the heck happened? Well, what happened was Donald Trump won the November 2024 election. All of a sudden, folks were far more likely to believe, hey, wait a minute, those votes were cast and counted accurately. But here, I think, is the biggest thing, the biggest sort of takeaway, which was election votes cast or counted accurately. The 2020 election, remember, we mentioned Republicans at 44%. Democrats were at 89% in the 2020 election. Not a big surprise, Joe Biden won that. But look at the 2024 election. Look at Republicans. 94% of Republicans believe that the 2024 votes were cast and counted accurately. Democrats saw a drop-off from 89 to 73. But again, Democrats far more likely to believe that even if their side lost, that the results were counted, the results were accurately reflective of the people's wills than Republicans were, Manu.
All right, now jumping back to the beginning of that last clip, that tells me something very, very interesting, right? That most people are memory holding January 6th, right? Because the mainstream news try to portray this thing as the worst day in American history, worse than 9/11, worse than Pearl Harbor, worse than the Civil War, worse than the Oklahoma bombing or whatever. Worse than all of these things. It was the worst day in American history because it was an assault on democracy. No, people ain't buying into that. That's a very, very good thing. Now, I think the reason a lot of people are against the pardoning is because they don't know most of those people are innocent of, being insurrectionists. Yeah, they're just outright innocent. And as a matter of fact, the people that were violent, that were attacking cops, blah, 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 those people, trespassers, so a lot of them are still serving time in prison till this day. Yeah, pardons are good for those people because let me ask you guys a question for me down in the comments. Let me know, how long do you think somebody should serve time in prison, in a federal prison, if they just fight with cops, they get into a scuffle with a police officer? Do you think 4 years is plenty of time for this? Let me know down in the comments section, right? That's an overkill, in other words. That's way too much time. A year in prison at the most for fighting with a cop, right? If you did no significant damage to the cop, a year in prison at tops. Just outright. So a lot of these people, they're still serving time. Then you have people like Enrique Tarrio, right? They're getting this sedition charge. The guy wasn't even in Washington, D.C. I'm sorry. The dude, the only thing he did on that day was send a text message to the Proud Boys saying, stay there. Like what? He's not even telling them to fight with cops or do any of this. There have been only a handful of Proud Boys, like 2 or 3, that were actually fighting with cops. Most of these were just random people that fought with cops. It's absurd. A lot of this is very, very nuanced. You got to look into all this. But, I think the pardons, he should pardon everybody at this point, just blanketly outright, because they've served their time. Just simply put, serve their time. Now, the seditious conspiracy guys, there's a handful of those as well, right? Enrique Tarrio, I'm not talking about him. The dude got 22 years. That should definitely be pardoned. Now, the guys that were actually there for seditious conspiracy, they need to absolutely look into those cases and see the extent of the seditious conspiracy, because I don't buy into that narrative that it was seditious conspiracy, right? We need to look into all this, and if Trump deems that he wants to pardon these people, I'm fine with that. If he deems that, hey, yeah, we can't have this, we can't send a message out there that this is okay, and he says no, he just doesn't want to touch it at all, I'm totally fine with that as well. Now, getting back to the election stuff, right? The last part of that clip. Now, I always call into question the methodology of these polls, right? And, the simple fact that they're polling 1,200, 1,300 people, and then they say this is representative of America. I can't stand that whatsoever, but okay, so let's go with that. Let's just assume for a second that this is representative of America. How did they ask all these questions? Because I am of the opinion that, 2020, sure, I trust those results. Joe Biden won that election. We know, but that's because I know why Democrats won that election, right? They pretty much changed the rules and laws to make cheating legal, to where they could cheat and get away with it. That's what they did, right? They couldn't do that this time because why? Republicans knew about this and they countered all these rule changes, right? In the 4 years since, we overturned a lot of those rule changes, and we put in safeguards against these rule changes, brought it back to how it was before, got rid of the universal mail-in balloting. That's a big component of this. But you say, well, hang on. Do they really trust the votes? I don't trust the votes in any election. There's always fraud, because when you say, did they trust the votes in that election? That's a blanket statement. That, to me, means every single vote. There's always fraud in every single election. Somebody tries to do something underhanded, or it comes down to the fact of you've got thousands of poll workers, people counting all these ballots, right? You got thousands of machines counting ballots. Machines make mistakes at a far lower rate than people, but they still make mistakes. So mistakes are going to be made. I don't 100% trust the outcome of any election. I know there's always a mistake, but it's never enough to, overturn the results or whatever, right? Just like in 2020, I trust the results. I don't trust that the count was 100% the most free and fair election of our lifetimes. I don't buy that whatsoever. We had several abnormalities, if you will. There's several we covered on this channel. Some with Dominion voting machines. There was genuine concerns right there, right? Like we covered one specific story of a few counties in Georgia where the Dominion voting machines were accessed remotely. That means they were connected to the internet. They were accessed remotely from Serbia, of all places. Now that's saying that's an abnormality is quite the understatement. I think there was something underhanded going on right there. Was it enough to overturn the results? I don't believe so. Right? These small little abnormalities all over the place, they don't add up. In other words, they don't add up to enough. Right? Joe Biden had way too many votes for that. I still buy into the fact that Democrats had a better ground game. They went door to door to Democrat residences to get Democrats to vote by mail. That's how they got so much of a turnout, if you will. That's the only reason Joe Biden got 81 million votes. If it wasn't for that, right? And Republicans didn't do this because there was a pandemic going on. We thought we were supposed to stay indoors. Yeah. That's what Democrats did. They changed the rules to allow for Democrat activists to go door to door to door. They changed other rules too, and we've covered several of those procedural changes that gave Democrats a leg up. But I think the activists going door to door, the ballot harvesting, I think that was the most significant change in the 2020 election, right? That's just outright, that's the most significant right there, because once again, Democrats did this and Republicans didn't because they didn't know of these rule changes. Plus, Donald Trump was out there saying, don't vote by mail, go on election day, blah, 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 because he was trying to stop the universal mail-in ballots. But, from a federal standpoint, you can't do much about that because states have the plenary power to conduct elections. Ain't nothing you can do about that, right? But Democrats, in their underhanded mind games that they love to play on the American people, talking about voter suppression, right? They suppressed the hell out of Republicans in 2020. And that's blatant hypocrisy at its best, right? At its best, we got to stop Donald Trump's assault on democracy. He's trying to assault democracy. He's trying to suppress votes. When that's exactly what they did. They suppressed Republican votes. It's all absurd. It's all insane. Now, I don't trust the results of the 2024 election. Like I say, I don't trust the entirety of the results, right? There was abnormalities, definitely. Not as many as in 2020. But there was definitely abnormalities. There was definitely some fraud going on. But overall, in general, I trust the results. Hey, it is what it is. But I think I've rambled off long enough on this one, y'all. I want y'all to let me know what y'all think about all this down in the comment section. I can't wait for my next video. You guys are going to love my next video, but y'all let me know what y'all think. Do y'all buy into the Dominion voting machine conspiracy theory that's out there about 2020? Or do y'all buy into the shadow campaign theory, or it's not really a theory, the implementation of the shadow campaign that we have outright proven on this channel? But let me know what y'all think about all this. That's all I got. I want to thank everybody for watching, and y'all try to have a good day. Stay legitical. Peace.